so that I would be given a chance to improve.
Okay. Okay. Just want to make sure that we're okay. Okay, so now this is going to kind of delve a little more into the patron side
Okay.
of the library, but we're currently working on an analysis of a specific trend. So our trend is digital natives.
Okay.
So, you know, the upcoming generations of just everything technological and how it relates to management. We were wondering if you had any experience with having to, I want to say transform, or having to adapt to the digital natives,
Well,
as opposed to the digital immigrants.
Right. So we think that the students, the younger students, we assume that they're all digital natives. And one thing that we did was we took on a subscription to an ebooks database, 150,000 ebooks, which is almost quadrupled our collection. We thought that it would be exactly what, they're all reading books on their phones, aren't they? They're not. I mean, the stats are growing. The usage data is improving. But the students, when they come into this environment, are really bound by their interpretation of the syllabus and by what the instructors tell them or how they hear the instructors. So we thought we were doing the digital natives a favor, and in fact they would come to the desk and say, I need a book on X. And we'd say, well, we've got this one book in the collection, it's from 1974, but our electronic books, we've got 8 books, and they're all brand new and up to date, and oh no, my teacher says I have to use a book. But these are books. You are, and I've actually said to students, here's my name, write it out for them. Give this to your instructor and say, Peter Hepburn says I can use ebooks for this assignment. I've never had anyone come back to me and tell me otherwise. So that was an assumption we made about digital natives that has not really proven correct. Anecdotally, we've heard the same thing from other community college libraries when we get together as our deans and directors and talk. It's been interesting hearing that our assumption on ebooks was completely wrong. We do find that they interact with our social media presence, not hugely so. I don't think people go to Facebook so they can look up the library, but they will use Facebook in order to ask questions about how do they get access to the databases, how do they, what are the hours even. We had someone who gave us 1 star on Facebook, a comment that you're not open on Saturdays, blah, blah, blah. And so we responded very gently and said, we wish we were open on Saturdays. We're trying to secure funding for that. We're sorry you feel that it was only a 1-star experience. And the person came back and said, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that's what I'd done. I love the library. I want it to be open more. So it was interesting. The other thing that we notice at the reference desk in terms of them being digital natives and using their phones is they do come in and they really are looking up. They keep their syllabi on their phones. So they're not really willing to read the books on their phones, but they'll keep their course information on there because they'll come to the desk and say, I need this book for my course. And we'll ask them, well, they don't have the name of the book right, or they don't even know the course name and number. Do you have your syllabus? Out comes the phone. And that's where we're seeing it in the most direct application of their use of technology.
I see.
I almost wonder if the digital immigrants are adapting to some of these other things like ebooks that we made assumptions about more readily than the students, because the digital immigrants, who we assume are older, aren't as don't look at the syllabus and see the word book and aren't as rigorous in their thinking about it. The younger students are just so deathly afraid that they're going to fail. And so we get some interesting interpretations that way.
That's really interesting. Okay. So I can assume that the program that was set out to address the subject would be the ebook subscription.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's something we'll maintain. We did that in part because students, we figured, oh, they're getting, they use technology all the time. This will be easy for them. We did it in part because it allowed us a very inexpensive way. We don't own the books, so they can disappear, unfortunately. But on the other hand, there's no limit to how many students can access them at one time. So we did it in part because it meant many students access one book, and it really increased the size of our collection. But what we also have to keep in mind is we have a fairly significant online education component. And although students from online courses will come into the library to get course textbooks on reserve and things like that, we can't assume that they're going to come onto campus. And when we go through the accreditation process for the college, if we aren't treating the online students and the students who use our other much, much smaller campus as equitably as possible, we will get dinged for that very badly in our accreditation process. So we keep those things in mind as well. We have the Ask a Librarian chat reference service that we put into place. That again is something where we can say that way students who are predominantly at the other campus where we have fewer hours of the library being open, or students who are online students, can get assistance from a librarian at a level that's equitable, we hope, to what the students at the main campus get. The reality is I look at the data for how many chat reference sessions there are, and it's really kind of dismal in a way. And when they do come through is when we're not staffing it. It's late at night when we let the consortium staff it instead. So yeah, again, another thing where we assume the digital natives might use it, but the reality is it's more being driven by accreditation and other considerations as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, going off of the whole stereotype that digital natives are the younger generations and digital immigrants are the older ones, would you say that there's a noticeable difference between staff as far as those who are digital natives and those who are digital immigrants?
Well, I think most of the staff is of a particular age. We don't really have, the youngest staff person, other than the student workers, the youngest staff person I can think of is in our mid-30s, so I'd say we're all digital immigrants.
Okay.
The youngest staff person is probably arguably a little more adept at online things. She's the one who got us to put up a Pinterest account. It was her project that she wanted to do, and I said, great, why don't you run with that? I don't know Pinterest at all. I'm aware of it. I don't use it. I said, this is absolutely fine. Just make sure the librarian who coordinates all of our social media presence is aware of it, talk with her about it so that everything is coordinated, but otherwise, knock yourself out. So she probably is a bit more savvy, but again, we're all of a particular age and older.
Right.
Sorry.
So being that they are digital immigrants, you feel like they've all adapted, everybody's adapted very well to the technology.
To differing extents,
Okay.
to differing extents.
But there's no definite noticeable difference.
Not in terms of getting the job done. I know that one of my librarians, for example, has as minimal a social media presence as possible. That's because of her privacy, personal privacy concerns, but it doesn't impact her doing her work at all. And in terms of she doesn't
can navigate perfectly fine.
Oh yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, she's aware of all these things. She can talk about them. She can provide content as needed. It's just her own personal choice that she's not on Facebook, and that's fine.
Okay. So going off of the whole ebook situation and the Ask the Librarian online, how would you feel that you need to address? Would you feel like you need to address the trend a little more, or no? Or do you feel like just going off of those two things, you kind of have a better idea of how to cater to the digital natives, or not?
It's anything. We have a bit of a better idea, but I would say that any future decision making is still going to take those other circumstances into consideration. The accreditation for institutions is such a big deal for us. It's really a big deal. It just is fear in everyone, just to make it through. So we would probably look at things as how is this going to impact our online students, not our digital natives or immigrants, but how is this going to enable our online students to have service that is commensurate with what the on-the-ground students get? That's probably going to be more the decision-making process. Similarly, if money comes available. Money does come available. It's surprising but true. And sometimes you're told, here, you need to spend this. So it wouldn't necessarily be that we would say, well, digital natives, digital immigrants, but we would say, how do we spend the money? And are there conditions where we have to demonstrate impact? And we would think of it that way first. So whether or not someone is adept digitally, natives or immigrants, let's use that. Such a weird terminology, especially in the Trump era. Immigrants bad, but sorry.
Know, yeah,
that was
really
political
is.
commentary. Sorry. It's not our primary consideration. It's certainly something we've thought about, but there are other considerations that we really tend to focus on more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your partners are going to watch this and be like, "Oh my gosh, that guy rambles," and just like, whoa.
No, it's all great, but I want to keep it under an hour so that
Okay.
you can go ahead and go about your day. I just have a few more.
Sure.
Let me see. In your role as management, what difficult decisions have you had to make? What's the most, if you have one? The one that stands out?
Oh boy. I mean, just in general, whenever you have to say no to something, whenever you have to say to someone, that's a good idea, but personnel ones are always the toughest. I haven't really had to say no. I've been very supportive of things. The ones that are the more difficult are when someone has enthusiasm. Someone wants to implement a new service, and it sounds really great, and like it may be through an outside vendor. It sounds really great. They're enthusiastic. They want to run with it. You want to say to them, do a trial, or let's pilot it. Let's do something. And then you look at the price tag. And I have to be the one to look at the price tag and say, okay, given this cost, is it a priority, or are these other things a priority?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I've had to say no to people. And I know that, it's not a deep crushing blow, but it is something they're enthusiastic about, or
Mm-hmm.
they really are interested in exploring and think it might be really cool. And I just have to be the manager and say, but it costs too much for what you're asking, or what you're saying its impact will be. And these other things have greater impact, and I need to preserve the funding for them, or even try to get more funding for them.
Mm-hmm.
So those have been the things. Personnel is always trickier as well. It's not so much saying no, as I said, but there have been times where you have to sit someone down and be critical of something they've done, and that's never fun for
Mm-hmm.
anyone. So the constructive criticism, we've all been told that, but you really do have to think about how to frame things so that people can improve, and that's not easy to do. That's really not easy
Mm-hmm.
to do,
Okay.
and to get them to agree that they can improve and they want to improve. That's
Mm-hmm.
the next step, and that's even trickier.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Going off of the difficult decision, is there an ethical dilemma that kind of comes up that you've ever had to deal with?
I haven't had any that I can think of. Anything that may verge on ethical, we've usually been able to clear up. When we talk about items in the collection, these haven't been difficult decisions, but weeding of the collection hadn't been done in a very long time. It's not ethical. People, censorship, it's weeding your collection is not censorship, but you have to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I've got someone here who we can talk about things, because we've been doing the reference collection just recently. We both went through and we did a sweep together.
Okay.
And just that, it's not ethical, but it's one of those things people don't like to see you throwing out, discarding materials, anything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything purely ethical that's come up. I really can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good
Fortunately,
thing.
yeah.
What do you think is the most important hidden aspect of your job?
I don't know if this is going to answer your question exactly. I don't know. It's important. I don't know if it's the most important, but it's probably the thing that consumes more than anyone would ever guess, and that's scheduling. Scheduling is a bear. Erin, who works with me here in this office, was one of my adjuncts before